Another day, another episode of Film vs. Analytics here on FantasyPoints.com and the Fantasy Points YouTube. Each day we are breaking down a new rookie based on that Dynasty ADP, battling them out, Film vs. Analytics. I am your host, Brett Whitefield, the film expert and COO of FantasyPoints.com. I'm going to be joined by Scott Barrett, the best analytical mind in the realm, who is also the CEO of Fantasy Points. Without further ado, let's break down some Rome Odunze. Scott, how are you, sir?
The best analytics mind in the realm. That includes is that the physical realm or the spiritual realm?
Oh, I was thinking more like, Game of Thrones, the Seven Kingdoms kind of realm,
Yeah,
kingdom.
yeah.
We're in a kingdom here.
I don't know
So
much about that, I'll be honest.
that's okay. I'm a nerd at heart. You know that. So
I do know that.
I just watched the movie Rebel Moon, and there's a lot of realm discussion. They use the word realm like 7,000 times in that movie. So, anyways, that's why
Okay.
I said the realm. It just on top of the dome. You know what I mean?
Realm Odunze, is that who we're talking about today?
Oh, look at that
Look at that.
transition. The ADP number 6 right now, correct? 6? Yes.
Yeah, 106 in Superflex rookie drafts.
Rome Odunze. Scott, I think we should start with you, Mr. Analytics. Tell me about Rome.
Yeah, so, what immediately jumps off the page and, great raw production. He led the class in receiving yards last year. I do wanna preface that with the fact that he had an extra 2 games and a whopping 129 route advantage on runner-up Malik Neighbors and didn't really clear him by all that much, and that's big. He averaged a career best 2.93 yards per route run last season. That was a mark bested by 7 other Power 5 wide receivers in this class. But to give him back his flowers for a moment, he played nearly the full season with a broken rib and a punctured lung. He was always Washington's wide receiver 1, but not really all that far ahead of Jalen McMillan when he was healthy. But also, McMillan's supposed to be a day 2 wide receiver. Jalen Polk is supposed to be a day 2 wide receiver. So there was some immense target competition there, and it was encouraging to see him as the clear wide receiver 1 in each of those seasons. A big concern for me ties back into that yards per route run thing I was just talking about. His best season by age adjusted yards per route run ranks only in the 65th percentile. That's just 8th best for this class. Um, 65th percentile among all day 1 or day 2 wide receivers since 2014. PFF's comp for him was big Chris Olave, and I like that a lot analytically. I will just say, analytically, I think Olave was the better prospect, but here's why it works. Both benefited from high-end quarterback play. Michael Penix Jr. is a projected early round 2 pick. Both were hyper efficient despite the disadvantage of highest end target competition. Both seriously underwhelmed in all after the catch metrics. Odunze's best season by yards after the catch per reception, excluding screens, ranked in just the 14th percentile among all day 1 or day 2 wide receivers. So ultimately, I like him. I don't know that the analytics say he's worthy of a top 15 pick, but I would agree he's probably the clear wide receiver 3 in the class. And before I hand it over to you, the film expert, and I know you're high on him, Matt Harmon does a really great job studying wide receiver separation with his project Reception Perception. And Romo Dunze was the first ever all green prospect he's ever scouted, doing this for, I don't know, nearly a decade. And what that means is he had elite separation scores on every single possible route. And so, yeah, it's certainly possible. I don't have access to separation data, that this is a player the film's going to like a lot more than the analytics. So I'll hand it back over to you, Brett.
Yeah, your point on Matt there in reception perception. Matt's a friend of the show. I'm comfortable talking about this. The separation that he charts, it's kind of in a binary form where it's success, yes or no. Was this route successful? So to see Rome with green all over the board is pretty awesome. That shows up on the tape for sure. And when I see Roma Dunze, we're talking elite size, strength, and athleticism profile. This guy, he pretty much can do whatever you want him to do with his body. He is fast, he's explosive, he can jump, he's got short area quickness, like elite short area quickness for a guy that size. He's a natural separator, and I know separation to me is my favorite trait for a receiver. Give me a guy who can separate, and I'll show you a guy who can produce at the NFL level, no matter the circumstances.
Yeah, same. This was also backed up by career contested target rate as well. One of the best marks in the class.
Yeah, and so when you see the separation skills, you kind of start to fall in love. His start stop ability, he has complete access to every route in the route tree, which again, you're giving me a developed receiver with route running ability and separation skills. It's awesome. Then when you factor in that size and athleticism, he can get off press. He can win at the catch point. I know that's not something we love to talk about, but he is elite at the catch point. In fact, I would say one of his negatives are sometimes he gets a little too comfortable at the catch point, and he'll be covered. He'll be safety over top of him in a corner in his hip pocket, and he'll still mailbox Penix and say, "Hey, give me the ball," and Penix will say, "Yo, Rome's down there somewhere," and throw it up, and Rome's got to go get it, and he's great at that. You know who else was great at that was Larry Fitzgerald, and that was my comp for Rome Odunze. Fitzgerald was the complete package coming out, similar size profile to Odunze. I think Odunze is probably a little bit better athlete than Fitz was coming out, but Fitz was a phenomenal route runner, had access to the full route tree, could pretty much do whatever you asked. A little underrated after the catch. I know Odunze's numbers after the catch, Scott, aren't great. I'll point back to receivers who play on the boundary as much as Rome does. That does limit your yak opportunity because you're usually catching the ball on the sideline. So um, that said, he's not elite after the catch or anything like that. I just think he's a little bit better than maybe his numbers suggest. Ultimately, there's not really a weakness with this game. When I was writing his scouting profile, Scott, I had to invent reasons to put, weaknesses in his chart. And it's just, he's a complete player. And that is what it is for me. Scott, where do you have Rome in your rankings right now? And how do you feel about a Larry Fitzgerald comp?
Yeah, like I said, he's my wide receiver 3. I don't know that analytically he's worthy of the projected draft capital I'm seeing, or all these reports that, any one of these 3 players could be the wide receiver 1 in this year's class. I think it's maybe a tier gap between the top 2 and Rome, and then maybe a smaller tier behind between him and the next wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald comp definitely seems a little bold, comping any player to the wide receiver who ranks second all time in career receiving yards. So I don't know. That's just me in the analytics, but I will say your film opinion matters a lot to me. I think wide receiver. Do you say wide receiver is your best position? Just because, like, to me, like, your hit rate at wide receiver is insane. Like, oh, Amon-Ra St. Brown should be a round 1 pick. Puka Nakua reminds me of Justin Jefferson. So I can't. If this were anyone else, I'd be like, yeah, it should be illegal to comp anyone to Larry Fitzgerald. But you get
Well,
a pass.
as we've told the listeners and
That's right.
watchers a
That's right.
bunch of
That's
times,
right.
stylistic comp here.
That's right.
This isn't a ceiling floor comp, but yeah, receiver is my best position by far. I'm good at other positions obviously too, but receiver is definitely where I hang my hat. As like I think a lot of that is my upbringing in the PFF system. Like that was my pretty much what I did is I only watched wide receivers for 4 years straight. So I learned a lot about the receiver game. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think this is one of those guys where I just say trust the tape. I know analytically, I do think target competition was a big deal. Jalen Polk's a good player. Jalen McMillion's a really good player. Now there were a million dropbacks to combat that, more than other teams, in fact. But I do think this is a trust the tape guy where I just watch him. There's not anything he can't do. And for that reason, he's my wide receiver too. And I don't think it's close between him and Neighbors, to be honest with you. There is an element of like pick your style. Like Neighbors is going to naturally fit some offenses better than O'Dunes. But for me, like in a vacuum, if I'm just making a general board for all 32 teams, O'Dunes is my clear cut wide receiver too.
Well, I think I'm gonna stick with him at wide receiver 3, but now, maybe I'll change the way I have those tiers, because yeah, this season I'm incorporating your film score into my final grade, and so yeah, your opinion matters a lot to me. I like that. I'd say 106 feels like a really good spot for him. I don't know that I'd want to trade down. Don't think I'd feel the need to trade up. I think that's a good spot.
Yeah, if Neighbors has already gone off your board and I'm sitting at 106, I've got quarterback taken care of, yada yada. I feel really good about taking Odunze at 106, especially in our earlier scenario where we were in the 101, 102 and trying to trade back. If 106 was the pick we traded back to, you got to feel great. I do think there's a precipitous drop off after Odunze and Neighbors. So I'll roll with picking Odunze at 106.